Hey, I'm Jake, and today on the Steaming Pile, we're talking about 10 villains cooler than their heroes. The list is in no particular order, I didn't rank them, we just got 10 of them. So let's start. First up, we've got Skeletor, the antagonist to He-Man in the Masters of the Universe series. Now, I'm predominantly going to be talking about the 80s cartoon series, as that's what I'm most familiar with. Now, granted, Skeletor and He-Man have appeared in cartoons, comics, and even some movies, but that's beside the point. Skeletor, in my opinion, and probably most other people's opinion, is way cooler than He-Man. Let's start with his voice. His voice in the original series is what it seems like every Saturday morning cartoon villain modeled their voice after. Curses! I'll get you, He-Man! Pardon the terrible impression, or the serviceable impression, but let's look at their crews, or their supporting cast, and we'll only name a few because, let's be honest, a lot of 80s cartoons were just made to sell toys. He-Man has a crew of supporting characters, which include Man-at-Arms, who looks like Tom Selleck LARPing. Then there's Orko, a crappy magician who looks like a bad Final Fantasy character. He's got Cringer, who does transform into the cooler version Battle Cat when Prince Adam transforms into He-Man. He's got She-Ra, who admittedly is fairly cool. He's got the Sorceress of Castle Grayskull, who is okay, I guess. Then we've got Skeletor and his crew, which include supporting awesome villains like Beastman, Evil Lyn, Triclops, Trapjaw, Stinkor, and Panther, who looks way cooler than Battle Cat in my opinion. Now, He-Man came out in the mid-80s and ended by the time I got to watch it. It was already in syndication, which I was a dumb little kid, so I thought a new episode was coming out every day. Didn't know what seasons were or anything. But I digress. The point is, it was the first cartoon in my childhood where I actually rooted for the villain. The villain was just much cooler. I had an obsession with skeletons. And let's be honest, He-Man looks like a more homoerotic version of the Ultimate Warrior. The transformation was even stupid. Prince Adam was already jacked to the gills. He looked like a closeted Chippendales dancer. Now, I loved Skeletor so much, and He-Man had barely been off the air by the time I got to watch it, so they were still selling the toys heavily. In fact, one memory I have very vividly is they were advertising Skeletor's Staff of Havoc, which was that sweet-looking goat head staff that he wields in the cartoons, comics, and everything else. But the way I remember it looking was having a hyper-realistic looking goat's head on it, or a goat's head skull on it, but that's not the way it looked at all. I recently watched the commercial, link in the description, and it's actually just a cheesy, stupid plastic skull with light-up red eyes that looks barely anything like the staff that he wields in the cartoons. But I tell this story because it was kind of funny, as when I was a little kid, watching this I became obsessed with it, and I really wanted this toy. I never got it, and my grandmother was actually very worried about me because she thought the staff was satanic, which is a joke when you see the commercial. She was actually so worried about me, she had a talk with my parents, which honestly just led to them having to explain to me what satanic meant, because I was 5, and who the hell knows what satanic means when you're 5. Well, before we move on, let's even look at the look of Skeletor. We've already talked about how lame Prince Adam / He-Man look, but just look at Skeletor. He's a hyper-muscular skeleton sorcerer who wields 2 awesome swords and rides a panther, and commands a legion of awesome bad guys. Skeletor is, again, inarguably more badass than He-Man, who looks like a dime store Conan wannabe. And that's all I've got to say about that. Next up, we've got Terminator. To be more precise, the T-800, the Schwarzenegger Terminator. Now, I know in later installments, the T-800, or different versions of him with the Schwarzenegger flesh, would become a hero, but in the first Terminator, he was a villain, and he was the best villain. He was the most frightening. He had the most iconic lines. He had the most personality for a machine, which made him more scary. Granted, the other ones seemed a little more cold and focused in later installments, but Schwarzenegger set the bar. And on top of that, he was way cooler than any of the protagonists in any of the preceding sequels or even the original. The only one who even comes close is Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, mostly in T2 and maybe this upcoming Terminator movie that was just released. Now, typically, John Connor is the protagonist in several of these movies, and every version of John Connor pales in comparison to the coolness that is Arnold. Like, Eddie Furlong, get the fuck out of here. Nick Stoll in Terminator 3, breaking into veterinary clinics to steal Animal drugs? Yeah, not cool. Who cares? Christian Bale in one of the newest Terminator movies as John Connor also is trash. It sounds like he's been smoking 5 cartons of cigarettes a day. He just recycles the Batman voice from Batman Begins and Batman The Dark Knight Returns, just the Nolan trilogy of Batman films, and it's fucking terrible. If anything, Michael Ironside hanging out in the submarine is way cooler than Christian Bale in that movie. So yeah, that's a big fat no to Bale Man. Anyway, speaking of Arnold, that brings us to our next villain, the Predator. The Predator is a villain so badass he has outclassed every movie hero that he has shared the screen with, and that includes the original cast. And the original cast was nothing to sneeze at either. It had Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dutch, it had Carl Weathers, it had Jesse Ventura, who may have had the best lines of the movie, and several other 80s muscle daddies. But, sidebar here, for a movie series that in general involves a space alien coming to Earth to hunt man for sport, the most unbelievable thing about the first Terminator movie is that Arnold Schwarzenegger is an American-born male named Dutch. He doesn't even bother to hide his accent. Anyway, back to the Predator. The Predator, as we've seen, seems to have somewhat of a code of honor, as it tries to have fair fights and hunt what it sees as worthy prey. The Predator has not only outcooled Schwarzenegger, but Danny Glover, Adrian Brody, and anyone else that it's shared the screen with. The only time anyone has come close to being as cool as the Predator was outside of the Predator movies. Yes, there are Predator comics, printed by Dark Horse. But what I'm talking about is the multiple crossovers that the Predator has had with Batman. Yes, that's right, the Dark Knight has fought the Predator. So in summation, the only character that has actually surpassed the Predator in coolness that the Predator has gone toe-to-toe with is the goddamn Batman. Next up, we've got the Darkness from Legend. The Darkness was a Satan-looking figure played by Tim Curry. This was one of Tom Cruise's first movies, the Darkness being the main villain. The plot of the movie being that the Darkness needed to kill the last of the unicorns to cover the world in eternal night. Now, this movie is beloved by tons of people. I don't really care for it, except for the villains, because the acting is so atrocious, the protagonists are so cardboard, that it tanks the movie for me. Not even Tim Curry's badass acting can save it. Yeah, granted, it's got one of the best makeup jobs ever in cinema, period. And it's got some great effects. The Goblin Blix looks amazing. The Swamp Witch or the Bog Witch, Meg Mucklebones, awesome. But Tom Cruise, who plays the hero Jack, who has to stop the Darkness's plan to kill the last of the unicorns, does such a terrible job acting, it destroys the movie. I mean, his acting is so bad, it has to be seen to be believed. If you have not seen Legend, I highly suggest watching it. And you'll love it, except for Tom Cruise. I don't even have a fucking opinion about Tom Cruise in general. Granted, Scientology is dumb as fuck, but Tom Cruise is okay in some movies, just not this one. Anyway, speaking of movies and awesome puppets and effects, let's move on to David Bowie from The Labyrinth. That's right, the Goblin King, Jareth. Now, The Labyrinth is a great movie. It is Jim Henson in the prime of his career, firing on all cylinders. The Henson Company is in prime form, cranking out great-looking characters from the Wild Gang, some of the heroes, Ludo, Sir Didymus, Hoggle. The effects are just top-notch amazing. The goblins look great. The songs are fun. It just speaks to how great David Bowie's performance was that's what most people remember. That and David Bowie's codpiece. Next, we've got Clubber Lang from the Rocky series, Rocky 3 to be precise. But before we begin with Clubber Lang, let me just get my opinion on the Rocky series out of the way. I've seen them all. I don't really care for them. An argument can be made for how good the first one was. Heck, maybe it even deserved the sequel. But damn, by the third one, they probably should have ended it. The fight choreography is pretty terrible up until the later installments in the series. Think Balboa, where it was actually pretty decent. Rocky just seems to block with his face and never give up. It's just dumb. I could do without Sylvester Stallone mumbling for 2 hours. But anyway, let's talk about the Rocky antagonists before we get to Clubber Lang. All of them are cooler than Rocky, up until about Rocky 5, where you've got Tommy Guns. That guy sucks, and yeah, you want to see Rocky kick his ass, even though that's like the worst of the Rocky series. The only real accomplishment of that movie is the fact that you actually wanted to see Rocky beat the shit out of Tommy Guns. I mean, hell, let's look at the first 2 Rocky movies. You've got Apollo Creed, who's just a more flamboyant, shit-talking Muhammad Ali, played by Carl Weathers. Carl Weathers is freaking awesome. You love him. But again, we're getting off topic. This is about Clubber Lang. Clubber Lang was played by Mr. T. And Clubber Lang is fantastic. That is the reason everyone should watch Rocky 3. I know I just trashed those movies, but damn, watch Mr. T at his finest. This was before A-Team fame, before Mr. T and his gymnastics team fame, Mr. T before tagging with Hulk Hogan in the first ever WrestleMania fame. This is Mr. T playing a hungry boxer. See, Rocky, by this time, in the film franchise, had won the world title. He starts to become complacent and lazy. And then you see Clubber Lang rising up through the boxing world, a vicious, hungry fighter. At some point in the movie, Clubber Lang just beats the ever-loving hell out of Rocky and takes the title. He beats Rocky so bad that Rocky actually becomes afraid to fight. He has to seek out Apollo Creed, who he has become friends with from the previous two movies, and Apollo Creed proceeds to tell him that he needs to find the eye of the tiger. And what follows is probably the most homoerotic training montage in cinematic history. I know I said you should watch this movie for Mr. T's performance, but you should also watch this movie for this ridiculous training montage. The montage is set to the Rocky theme. It involves them in entirely too short 80s shorts, running across the beach, lifting weights, jumping rope, doing all the typical things. And I swear to God, at some point with the beach running, there's an extreme close-up of both of their packages for a split second. I'm at a loss for words for how stupid and ridiculous this is, even for an 80s film. I mean, there's more homoeroticism in this 2.5 minute montage than there is in the entirety of the Skatt Brothers Life at the Outpost music video. But we've got you covered. We dropped the link in the description. Now, does Rocky regain his title? Does he beat Clubber Lang? Well, you probably already know the answer, but I'm not going to tell you. Go watch Rocky 3. Next up, potentially the most controversial choice on the list, Bowser. Yeah, that's right. Bowser, aka King Koopa. Way cooler than Mario. Now don't get me wrong, I like Mario. I love a lot of Mario games. I love Mario, Mario 3, Mario Tennis, Mario Party, Mario Kart, Mario RPG, Paper Mario. All those games are fun. I love Smash Brothers. I love a lot of the Mario and Company games. They're great. But you know what? Usually when I can play another character in a Mario game, I play a different character. Mario Party, I'm Donkey Kong. Freaking Mario Kart, I'm Donkey Kong, or I'm Bowser, or I'm Wario. I mean, again, the Italian plumber, pretty cool, worthy mascot for Nintendo, but he pales in comparison to the coolness that is Bowser. Bowser looks like Slash from the Ninja Turtles cartoon had an orgy with a dinosaur and a dragon. He's cool, he breathes fire, and come on, let's think about Mario RPG here. Bowser was the coolest character to play. And you know what the most annoying thing about Mario RPG was? It was the fact that you had to keep Mario on your freaking team. Who didn't want to replace Mario and just have a team of Bowser, Geno, and Malo? Or hell, sometimes Bowser, Geno, and the princess. Anyway, anybody but Mario. Now don't get me wrong, Mario was fun to play in that game, but he was nowhere near as cool as Bowser. Bowser's swinging around chain chomps, he's getting the drill claw, he's got cool special moves. And it was, I believe, the first time you actually got to play Bowser as a character in video games. And consider this. Who would you rather play in Smash Brothers? Mario or Bowser? And if you answered Mario, you're a loser. Unless you're talking about Dr. Mario, because Dr. Mario's pretty pimp in Smash Brothers, you know, I'll give you that. No, not only that, but Mario's not even as cool as Donkey Kong. The whole story to Donkey Kong is that Mario was abusive to Donkey Kong. That's why he ran off and stole his girlfriend and went on a rampage. But maybe I'm being a little too harsh on Mario in that regard, because supposedly the original Mario and Donkey Kong is Jumpman, who is the father of Mario and Luigi, and the original Donkey Kong is the grandfather of who we all know and love as Donkey Kong, Cranky Kong. So, Mario, you get a pass, but your dad was an animal-abusing dick. Yeah, y'all didn't know that Mario and Donkey Kong lore went that deep. Look for a future video. Anyway, let's move on. Specifically to Cobra, the terrorist organization that were the antagonists to the Special Forces unit G.I. Joe in G.I. Joe. Unlike Transformers, a series that was made relatively around the same time as G.I. Joe, and was designed to sling toys, like He-Man and G.I. Joe, the Autobots and Decepticons are neck and neck in coolness. But it is a no contest when it comes to the Joes versus Cobra. I mean, who do you got on the Joe side that even measures up to Cobra? Duke, the leader? No, he just sucks. He's like Captain America without a personality or super soldier serum or a sweet-ass shield. Let's see, who else you got? Ripcord? No thanks. You got Scarlet? Yeah, I don't care. You got Roadblock? Yeah, Roadblock's alright, but still, doesn't hold a candle to any of the Cobras. The only ones you have that are even remotely close to as cool as the Cobra villains are Shipwreck, and the only reason I like Shipwreck as a kid is because he had a parrot sidekick, and I was a sucker for that, because I was 5 and stupid. And then you've got Snake Eyes, but, you know, on the Cobra side, you got Storm Shadow. They're both awesome-ass ninjas, so they cancel each other out. Now, let's list some of the Cobra guys. Cobra Commander, who was amazing, and I'm a hooded Cobra Commander fan. The helmet's okay, but hood all the way. And let's go to his voice too. Much like Skeletor, Cobra Commander, awesome. You gotta love his voice. You gotta love how he talks like this. And always finds a way to over-enunciate his S's. Love that shit. Cobra Commander, awesome. Destro, amazing. Who doesn't love Destro, the arms-dealing piece of crap with the iron mask? Baroness, the female companion to Destro. Dr. Mindbender, fucking awesome. Zartan, awesome. And again, Storm Shadow, who's just as badass, if not more badass, than Snake Eyes. It's just a whole litany of characters who outclass the Joes every step of the way. But again, you're gonna have a show that's basically designed to sling toys and give everybody a red, white, and blue boner. But you're going to make the terrorists cooler? Like, who the hell thought of that? The symbol, the big red cobra, way cooler than the Joe symbol, which it just says G.I. Joe with an American flag under it. It boggles the mind of what little foresight went into the planning of that they would actually make the American side that much less cool than the Cobra side. Now granted, I know it was the 80s, and most Americans were more patriotic than a bald eagle that shits guns and barfs freedom. But still, those were the adults. The kids knew what was up. Cobra all the way. Next up, we have Akuma from the Street Fighter series. Now, Akuma may not be your favorite Street Fighter character, but I'm comparing him to Ryu. And Akuma is cooler than Ryu, and in my opinion, cooler than all the other Street Fighter characters. From his epic-ass entrance in Street Fighter The New Challengers, if you're able to unlock it, where if you've done well enough, gotten enough perfects, cleared enough points, I can't quite remember how it's done, he comes in on the final fight, usually with Bison, hits him with the Raging Demon, kills him, and you fight Akuma. If you're able to beat Akuma, you get to play as Akuma. So yeah, the guy that you had to spend infinite continues on as a kid, one-shotted by Akuma. And that's how we're introduced to this character. Now, the backstory on Akuma has changed over the years, is pretty complex. He was Goki, sometimes the brother of, or just the training partner of Goken, Ken and Ryu's master. They trained under Gotetsu. Initially, Akuma was exiled by his master for using the Satsui no Hado, or Dark Hado. Now, Akuma's story was pretty cool in the fact that originally, before like some of the comics and Street Fighter 4, I think, sort of watered it down with the power of nothingness, it appeared that the Satsui no Hado wasn't just a forbidden technique. It was using all of the Hado style. It always seemed like Ryu, Ken, and Goten only used half the style, and that Akuma was actually using the full style. If you watch the movie Street Fighter Alpha, it goes into Akuma's conflict, or Goki's conflict, with Gotetsu. After being exiled, Goki comes back to challenge Gotetsu, and murders Gotetsu. After killing Gotetsu, he takes his beaded necklace, which is what he wears in the games, that are drenched in Gotetsu's blood. Now Goken is left alive and years later would train Ken and Ryu. At one point while Ryu was off fighting in the first Street Fighter tournament, or Street Fighter 1, Akuma returns to Goken's dojo, which was Gotetsu's dojo I believe, challenges Goken and kills him, or at least so we thought until Street Fighter 4. Like I said, Street Fighter 4 kind of waters down Akuma's story by adding another path for the Hado. And to be honest, Akuma's just way cooler than Ryu because Ryu's just a whiny bitch. He's like, oh, what is the path of a true martial artist? I don't know, why does it take you like 10 fucking games to figure that out? And when you actually read some of the comics and things, it's pretty great. Ryu is such a tool bag that by the adaptation of Street Fighter Third Strike, he gets his ass kicked easily by Ken. The comic basically starts out where Ken challenges Gil, who is the boss of the Third Strike game, gets his ass kicked thoroughly by Gil, to the point where he is near death. Ken then looks inside of himself and finds a reason to keep going and push through the pain and live. Granted, he lost his fight to Gil, but he was able to survive because he found out why he fights, and that is his family. After this, he sends a letter to Ryu, inviting him to his home in America. They have a sparring match. Ryu is picked up by Sean, Ken's student, from Street Fighter Third Strike, taken to the Master's estate, Ken Masters. They have a fight, and Ryu gets demolished by Ken, and Ken explains to him that he has become a true martial artist because he figures out why he fights, and that the reason Ryu has never been able to attain this is because he does not have a reason as to why he fights. And there's more to it than that. But back to Akuma. If you want to see a good adaptation of the Street Fighter story / lore, watch Assassin's Fist. You can find it on DVD, online, or just about in any retail store. And it happens to be the only good adaptation. That's right, if you like the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, you're wrong. If you like the Chun-Li movie, you're even more wrong. Alright, lastly, we have Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom, for those of you who don't know, is one of the biggest bad guys in Marvel Comics. Typically, he fights the Fantastic Four, and if you think that the Fantastic Four is cooler than Dr. Doom, go fuck yourself. Now, in my opinion, Dr. Doom is one of the greatest villains, not only in comic book history, but in all of fiction. He's just amazing. He borders on being cartoonishly evil sometimes, but at the same time, he sells it. He straddles a line of cartoonishness and seriousness that few other characters are able to pull off. And in the hands of a good writer, it's seamlessly done. Doom is definitely greater than the characters that primarily oppose him. Way cooler than that cuck Reed Richards. More awesome than the Invisible Woman. More awesome than the Human Torch. And just more of a badass than the Thing, even. Now granted, I love the Thing. One of the cool things about Dr. Doom is the fact that he is just a mortal man. Now granted, he's one of the smartest villains in all of the Marvel Universe. If not the smartest villain in the Marvel Universe. He has stolen the powers of the Beyonder and Galactus in the original Secret Wars and basically been a god. He has stolen the powers of the Silver Surfer before, and he actually became god in the last big Secret Wars event, not to be confused with the original Secret Wars or Secret Wars 2, where the multiverse was being destroyed due to certain incursions, and he took the power of the Beyonders and Molecule Man to take all of the fragments of the multiverse and create one cohesive world. Now granted, that didn't last forever. Eventually the status quo was basically restored. But not only this, Doom started from humble means. Doom was a peasant gypsy who lived in the wilds of Latveria with his family and tribe. I'm not going to go over all of the details of Doom's life, but needless to say, he eventually overthrew the Latverian government and became the dictator of Latveria. Though considered a dictator in the comics, his people love him as he provides education, clean water, and health care to all of his people. Sickness has been eliminated and there is no poverty or famine. Another thing that makes Doom so amazing is the fact that he is a master of both science and sorcery. He's like Iron Man and Doctor Strange had a baby. It's great. I don't understand how he loses when Someone like Reed Richards or Iron Man will not mess with magic at all. Magic, they don't fucks with it. No, not at all. Same thing with science. Now granted, Doctor Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme and outclasses Doom when it comes to magic, but not by a lot. And even though Doctor Strange was a medical student and master surgeon and very intelligent when it comes to medical science, he is not a scientist on the level of Doctor Doom. Now imagine it. Doctor Doom is potentially the second greatest sorcerer in all of Marvel Comics, one of the top scientists, and he mixes the two. Super science, super magic. How is this guy not ruling the world yet? Probably because they need to keep selling comics. But not only that, Doctor Doom may not be wrong. Doctor Doom has seen the future. He has peered into the future with his magic, and in every possible future, mankind does not survive, except for when Doom is in control of the world. When Doom is the master of the world, that is the only future in which human beings live on. Now this adds a wrinkle to Doom's motivations, like he needs to make the hard choices, or feels he must make the hard choices to make his rule come about. He does actually care for his people and the human race as a whole. In fact, in Doom War, when he is trying to steal all of Wakanda's vibranium, there's a point where he is judged by the Panther god Bast for his motivations. And Bast, even though he doesn't want to allow Doom to accomplish his goals, has to judge Doom's motivations as pure. And Doom states that he does what he does out of love. Again, it's the complexity of this character that makes me really enjoy him. Now, before we go, just another reason he's cooler than the Fantastic Four is in the recent return of the Fantastic Four, one of the very first story arcs is one where Doom has lured Galactus to Latveria. He then lures the Fantastic Four to Latveria with the threat of Galactus to have them aid him in capturing Galactus, unbeknownst to them. He then traps Galactus and plans to use him as an alternative eternal energy source to power the world. Granted, there's some devious means here. Doom is planning to use the energy to force mankind to make him the ruler of the world, or just not share that technology with him. But the argument that the Fantastic Four has against this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Galactus, the Eater of Worlds, the embodiment of genocide, a being who has not killed millions, maybe not even billions, but possibly trillions throughout the universe. But Reed Richards thinks, no, he's a force of nature, we can't judge that. Hey Reed, what have scientists been doing throughout the history of all of fucking science? We have harnessed forces of nature and bent them to our will. From Benjamin Franklin harnessing electricity to, I don't know, hydroelectricity, solar power, geothermal energy, shit, oil, all of that stuff. That's what scientists do, you fucking moron. But anyway, I digress. Doctor Doom is amazing. Granted, the Fantastic Four beat him, but in my mind, they're the fucking villains in that story. Doom was going to power the world. Now, don't get me wrong, Reed did find out that Doom's calculations were off and that he wasn't going to be able to hold Galactus, but instead of trying to stop him, why don't you just help him and convince him to share the power? But anyway, I could go on forever. Let me end this by saying, please read the Doctor Doom solo series so they don't cancel it and I've got something to do every month. That's it for this week's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, Epstein didn't kill himself.
This video was sponsored and approved by Dr. Doom and the Latverian Information Ministry. Hail Doom!
Now granted, I know it was the 80s and most Americans were more patriotic than Chuck Norris draped in the flag riding a bald eagle to Nazi Germany to roundhouse Hitler in the... More patriotic than Chuck Norris in a monster truck with a monster truck with... And most Americans were more patriotic than Chuck Norris driving a monster truck that runs on the... And most Americans were more patriotic than Chuck Norris flying on a bald eagle. And most Americans were more patriotic than Chuck Norris driving a monster truck through... Fuck, man, I can't spit this out. Now, granted, I know it was the 80s, and most Americans were more patriotic than Chuck Norris driving a monster truck through the Berlin Wall, to time travel back in time, to soar on an eagle and kick Hitler in the face. There we go. And most Americans were more patriotic than Chuck Norris with a monster truck time machine going back in time to Fuck, man.